Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen, and today we're diving back into the world of Terminator. As I've been doing over the last couple of weeks on the lead up to Terminator Dark Fate's release, is going over the entire Terminator timeline and the T-series creations, the infiltration units. Now it's really important to note that we're not debating the canon status of these creations. It's not really something that we need to get into, because as with every single movie, canon status of everything in the previous movies or previous media is always up for debate. So as with all of these things, it's fine, you can debate it in the comment section, but it's not something I'm going to be discussing. Now today is an interesting series unit. We'll be looking at the T-400. This is interesting because it really shows the development process that Skynet could have, if it's considered canon, gone through to eventually get to the T-800 and then the later units that we see today as being the most dangerous and deadly and obviously the most iconic. Now the T-400 appeared in the Terminator game, Terminator Dawn of Fate. That was its first ever appearance. It did also appear in terms of being mentioned in some novels across the years as well. Terminator Hunt, it was mentioned, along with Terminator Salvation Cold War and Terminator Salvation Trial by Fire. Again, both of those, it was merely just mentioned. So the T-400 or the T-400 Endo is a humanoid hunter-killer unit, though it really does not look like a human. It's not a sophisticated looking hunter-killer at all. It's merely humanoid in terms of it being bipedal and very loosely resembling a human. Now it is also deemed to be a clanker, that's a sideline name, and this is due to the distinct sound that it makes as it walks along. Again, owing to the fact that it's a very unrefined hunter-killer unit. This unit was first created in 2018 by Skynet and of course is the prior unit to the T-500 Terminator. Now Skynet created the T-400 during initial testing to mimic human autonomy. The idea of the creation was to create a hunter-killer that had a vague shape, a vague size and vague range of motion and mobility of a human being. It's essentially a very, very early prototype to the T-800 and what would inevitably become the T-1000. This is all very much R&D phase for those people familiar with industry and engineering. Now, the T-400 was comprised of a hyper-alloy. However, the hyper-alloy construction and armor that the T-400 had was not perfected at all. It really was a crude-looking humanoid hunter-killer. So the 400 series itself had a construction which was essentially cheap and not particularly durable in terms of the materials that was used. It was very easy and it was fast to produce and put into the field. Now again, the reason for this is just to get infantry and ground units out on the battlefield as quickly as possible. Of course, Skynet initially on Judgment Day released all of the nukes, but because of humanity still rising up to fight back, it really did require more ground units, aka the humanoid hunter killers. Now due to these reasons, Skynet would keep the production of the 400 series en masse as essentially expendable soldiers. And this was even after the much more refined, robust, and frankly better humanoid hunter-killer units were created, such as the T-5000 or the T-600. Now the 400 series Terminator would continue as ground troops shortly after their creation, and some were then used as guards at different Skynet installations, factories and internment camps. This is of course where humans were held. Now as I discussed at the start, this particular Terminator is mentioned in Terminator Salvation novels. So in the Terminator Salvation timeline, the T-400 has a specific use. It is utilized actually to just capture humans by Skynet, of course along with its other duties, but this is an interesting use for the 400 Terminator. I really do pose the question to you as well as myself, is that how on earth would the T-400 get close enough to humans to be captured? Now, in terms of technical data for the T-400 Terminator, at the time of its creation, the T-400 was an impressive and even menacing foot soldier. It stood roughly 7 feet tall and would weigh about a quarter of a ton. It was physically strong and could lift about 1,000 pounds of weight, and it was known to be able to, and sometimes it was even fond of, if you could say that about Terminators, breaking through concrete and reinforced walls. It would easily beat a human in close combat unless the human enemy was intelligent and cunning enough to use its weaknesses against it. Now, furthermore, just to add to that, any 400 Terminator, any humanoid looking Terminator would be impressive and menacing. It doesn't have to be a refined and non-crude looking robot to be impressive. Skynet was always vastly above anything that humans were creating of the time. So the T-400, though crude now by the T-800 standards, was absolutely impressive when it was initially entered into service. The T-400 series, unlike later Terminator series units, did have several areas where its wiring was exposed, which I guess is a throwback to the T1, which you can see linked above in this video. Now, these would become huge weaknesses for the T-400 series in time, and Resistance fighters clearly learned that the wires would be great targets and would render the T-400 incapacitated. It also did not help that the T-400 had only one big red optical sensor that glowed red, as opposed to later series units where they would install two optical sensors and various other sensors. Of course, the 800 Terminator had eyes, or what we can deem to be eyes anyway. Now, not only that, but the one sole optical sensor would glow bright red and would be a massive giveaway even at a distance. Resistance fighter snipers would be easily and very, very much capable of targeting them and picking them off one by one. Now, the intelligence of the T-400, again being the very first hunter-killer series that actually utilized artificial intelligence, would have a very primitive CPU. It is nothing like the T-800 units. Of course, it did have just enough intelligence that it would be able to walk, shoot straight, follow simple orders, hunt and eliminate a target, and also it was able to tell differences between allies and enemies, so it wasn't merely just blowing up T-400s or other robot units. Now, of course, the limited intelligence impaired the T-400 in many, many ways. One of these ways was it was incapable of adapting to the constant changes in the battlefield. This, of course, gave the T-400 enormous difficulty at battlefield improvisation, and in time became predictable and easily outsmarted by resistance fighters. Their mentality could be compared to either an ape or a very slow-witted child. So again, although the T-400 was used up until very late in Skynet's development and process, they had to go the way of the dodo and be retired from service, or essentially relegated to very menial tasks. Now, of course, the ultimate fate of the T-400 was eventually deemed obsolete by Skynet. Of course, the newer humanoid hunter-killers and infiltration units were developed, and they quickly replaced the T-400. The T-400 was cheap, obsolete, and the armor itself was not nearly durable enough to protect the unit at all. As humans developed plasma rifles and advanced weaponry, the T-400 would essentially become Skynet's liability, and they rusted. So there you go, that is a quick rundown of the T-400. I hope you did enjoy this brief look at this series Terminator. I hope you did. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up, and please do share this video. If you're new here, make sure you do hit subscribe. You can stay up to date on the world of pop culture and movie news by hitting the bell notification icon. Also, if you want to take your support just that little bit further, please do check out my Patreon page, linked down below in the description box, or the merch underneath every single video. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. I've been Mr. H. Take care.